Hi everyone, and welcome to our first live webinar of 2025. We're here today to discuss the Seraphim Space Index Q4 24, and I'm excited to be joined today by Seraphim investor Lucas Bishop, who will be discussing all the data and the latest trends from the SpaceTech sector during that period. Lucas will be happy to answer any questions you have at the end, so please post them in the chat and we'll get to them when we can.
Yes.
Hi Lucas, thanks for joining me today. So let's get straight to the first question. In 2024, we saw a record-breaking 601 deals in the space sector, a 50% increase from the previous year. What do you think attributes this remarkable surge in sustainable? Do you think this is moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, the trend has been relatively consistent, unlike investment, which has had a little bit more of a rocky track record recently with some peaks and troughs. In terms of the absolute number of deals that are being done within space, it has pretty much been continuously up and to the right. And yeah, 2024 had a record number of deals that are right around 600. So I think this continuous kind of positive trend is the result of a combination of factors. I think the first of which is probably just the fact that there is tangible evidence and examples of space businesses leading to venture outcomes. So that leads VCs being more willing to participate in what previously would have been, a completely untenable field of investment. Likewise, you have engineers and founders emerging from this first generation of kind of entrepreneurial, successful space businesses to build their own businesses, or engineers or other professionals who just see that it is possible in this sphere and decide to start their own businesses. That's probably on the US and European side. I think in Asia, Asia's been a very large contributor to growth in the terms of the number of deals, with China accounting for 50% of Asia. I think a lot of that growth just stems from the interest of catching up to a lot of the capabilities that the US has developed in light of SpaceX's reusable rocketry and lots of other companies across the space value chain. But broadly, I think a lot of these factors are really a positive feedback loop, which I can only see continuing to grow the number of founders and businesses that are involved in startups involved in space going forward.
Yeah, also it's super exciting, and it's clear that the increase in commercial demand is also a huge driver. So it's fantastic to see. Hopefully, we'll see that continuing this year. And also, total investments, you report, it grew by 25% year on year. Quarterly investment activity showed a slight decline by the end of Q4. What factors contributed to this decline, do you think? And do you see this as a temporary setback or just part of a longer term trend?
Yeah, no, I think there's quarter to quarter there can be quite a lot of noise as well. So this quarter was $1.8 billion invested, slightly down from the previous couple. If you look at the largest deal of this quarter, it was Firefly at 175 million, which is meaningfully less than the top deals in the last three quarters. Best example of that would be the Chinese satellite constellation that they raised about $1 billion. So if you have one of these standout transactions of 500 million plus, inherently that skews the entire quarter very, very, very positively. And the fact that the largest deal of this quarter was on the relatively small side, I think just results in a quarter that is down from the previous. But hard to draw really too many conclusions from all of that. These large deals kind of occur sporadically and skew the quarters very positively when they do happen. So yeah, difficult to draw too much from that.
Was that the World Labs, the previous?
I know. So World Labs is a US based business. They raised 230 million. I think that was Q2.
Was it Q2?
Q1, it's a Chinese Leo constellation. I would butcher the name, so I'll skip it. But they raised near enough $1 billion for a LEO constellation.
Great, cool. Thank you for that, Lucas. Really interestingly, you reported that Beyond Earth saw increased investment, with 3 of the top 10 deals coming from this segment, which I think has not happened previously. Sorry, I just dropped my microphone. Apologies, everyone. Could you share some insights into what specifically is attracting investors into this Beyond Earth segment, such as those involving lunar or deep space exploration? Because I know these are very exciting areas for most people.
Yeah, I think this quarter had quite a high representation of these businesses. We have actually in the past seen quite a few other large deals being done that would probably top some of the quarters. I mean, Voyager, Sierra Space would probably be the best example at 1.4 billion. Because or anything revolving around the in-orbit economy, inherently these are very capex intensive businesses and end up raising fairly large rounds to finance them. So the 3 that we had this quarter were the Exploration Company, Inversion, and Impulse, all actually doing quite different things, albeit all bucketed under this kind of in-orbit economy segment. So the Exploration Company is more about the commercial in-orbit economy, refueling the ISS, potentially doing experiments in microgravity. They raised an extremely strong round for a European company at about $160 million. So very impressive on that front as a Series B round. Inversion is much more a defense-focused business. So their ambition is to produce Earth return capsules, which could on the surface sound a lot like the Exploration Company, but their idea is much more about responsibly returning things to Earth, and I think generally focused on defense. Impulse, I think there's also quite a strong defense interest here for high mobility platforms, but Impulse is more about the movement of your satellite or movement in space, so orbit raising or going to interesting orbits. So all quite different, all raise fairly large rounds because inherently they're quite capex intensive. But I guess shows quite a lot of different applications here covered under the banner of this kind of in orbit economy. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just on the Exploration Company, why do you think are the US companies or that are doing the same thing, or how come a European company got in there and raised that?
So I guess Northrop and SpaceX and not Starliner maybe, but these companies are kind of doing space station resupply, and that is going to be, I think, a large part of the Exploration Company's business. But crucially, I guess the Exploration Company is really lining up to be the European leader in that front. I mean, right now, Europe doesn't really have anyone capable of providing that service. So the Exploration Company is kind of an EU sovereignty play at accessing space and the microgravity environment.
So continuing on that theme, European firms, including ISI, they notably active in Q4. What do you think is driving and growing interest and investment in European in space tech companies?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, this quarter was a good example, showing a fairly strong showing for EU businesses. And in fact, this year, I wouldn't say just this quarter, but this year has seen a few quite decent rounds. I mean, others would include D-Orbit, among others. I think the number of European companies that have raised such large rounds, whatever call it 100 million plus, are relatively few in number compared to the US. But it does show that I guess the winners globally in Europe still manage to get financed, and generally from very international names, and that also there does seem to be a bit of a thesis among investors emerging around European sovereignty. A business that we wouldn't include because it's not a space business, but also plays to that kind of thesis is defense business Helsing. So I think that might also be at play behind some of the investment decisions into these kind of leading EU-based businesses.
Yeah, it's great to see strong activity in these European firms, despite the round sizes being smaller, but that'll probably change over time, potentially. You mentioned earlier Firefly Aerospace, 175 million Series D, which was the largest deal in Q4. What made this deal stand out to you, and how does it reflect the broader trends in funding for SpaceTech startups?
I think this one shows, well, and in fact, the whole top 10 showed that, I guess, funding, or the large rounds that are being completed at the moment, or the largest that are being done within space, are all within capital intensive businesses. Firefly is going to need that 175 million to scale their launch or their satellite missions. But I mean, capital is essential for their business to reach scale. And the same goes for the other companies outside of that top 10. So what does that imply? I mean, in previous quarters, it's always skewed towards capitally intensive businesses, with a few, I guess, more rare exceptions of very high performing capex light, more software businesses that are really at a point where they can scale. So yeah, I don't know, just indicates that these capitally intensive businesses are the ones that are they're forced in a position to raise in order to scale.
Yeah, so it's as simple as they need the cash and
Yeah.
Yes. Then if anyone has any questions for Lucas on any of these topics, please post them in the chat. I know some people have been agreeing here with what he's been saying. So please, if you want to know anything further or to dig any deeper, let us know. Let's talk about China, Lucas. China's space market saw significant growth, as you mentioned, in 2024. How do you view the growing competitiveness of China in space tech investment, and what does this mean for the broader global ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think it's something that the US will have their eyes on very keenly. I think, at least for the moment, it's a little bit difficult to see, Chinese businesses directly competing, like for like with the same customer base of US businesses. My assumption would be that, in connectivity, in launch, in Earth observation, the customers in each of the domestic markets will go with the domestic companies, and likewise, people in allied markets to each country are probably going to remain primarily with those respective nations. I think maybe in the longer term, as products and services get a little bit more rolled out, we could see more overlap. But I think China's growing space capability is something that's really front of mind for US and particularly in defense. So yeah, I think the US is very mindful of that and is trying to, has been very vocal about maintaining technological superiority. In fact, something that Jared Isaacman mentioned as part of his as part of an interview ahead of his kind of NASA appointment. So yeah, I see it potentially a driver of further investment. I mean, we've seen defense focused businesses like I've forgotten the name. Leo, can you help me? What's the US business that raised like 100 million? Doesn't matter. It'll come back to me the second we close this stream.
If anyone can remember, let us know.
Now. I know the name.
Which business?
I remembered it. I tell you, it was.
No, but I mean, what did they raise?
Oh, they do kind of like defensive satellite. So it'll come back to me. Don't worry.
Yeah, well, we can move on. Yeah, so I think was it Q3 that you reported that China investment in China had overtaken US, and then finally back at the end of 2024, US was back in the top spot.
No, I think it was through the first half of 2024, China had actually overtaken in terms of
for the first
terms
time
of investment. That was in large part as a result of that that deal into the Chinese Leo mega constellation, which was about $1 billion.
Yeah.
But also, buoyed by quite a lot of deals in and around, satellite manufacturing and launch. So yeah, but very surprised. I mean, if you look historically before 2023 or so, China had been a relatively small, or had accounted for a relatively small proportion of overall, VC investment into space businesses. So from that point, becoming again the largest geography for the first half of 2024 is really quite noticeable.
Thank you, Lucas. Seed stage deals dominated the quarter, comprising 55% of the total deal count. How does this reflect the health of the SpaceTech system, and what's causing this trend, do you think, compared to previous quarters?
So I think it's actually pretty normal. In venture as a whole, you have a fairly high attrition rate for businesses progressing from pre-seed to seed to A and all the way up, I guess, to IPO. So I think this is just a fundamental reality of venture, and no matter what industry you look at, it always remains probably approximately the same. If you look at the number of Series D deals being done, it numbers annually in probably not more than 20. So yeah, it's just a fundamental reality of venture. For every for every 300 pre-seed seed stage deals that get done, it's probably less than a tenth the raise at Series D.
Yeah, but I think it's great to see. It really does indicate a nice, healthy pipeline for the future, and it's great to see investors putting trust into these early stage businesses. And as a little plug, we have currently our Seraphim and Generation Space Accelerator applications running at the moment for Mission 15. So if anyone is listening and would like to take part in that, please let us know. I think applications are open till next week. So Lucas, you also reported that Series A activity rebounded at the end of 2024 after a slightly difficult 23. What factors do you think contributed to this?
Yeah, so Series A actually in particular, along with a lot of the growth stages, but Series A took a very tangible hit in terms of the number of companies progressing to A round after the kind of bubble burst a little bit in kind of mid 2022. So in 2021, a lot of businesses almost by default were progressing to Series A. When things got a little bit tighter, I guess investors had to make more difficult decisions, and I think we saw, assessing businesses once again much more harshly on the basis of their metrics and achievements rather than, I guess, by momentum continuing to invest. So I would say around that kind of 2022 mark, there was a pretty significant cut down in the number of A rounds in particular that we're getting over the line, and I think things have maybe since then just loosened up a little bit. Maybe there was a bit of a backlog of companies of about that stage, maybe with approaching the right metrics, but still not in the position to raise an A round. So maybe there's a bit of a backlog of A rounds happening as well, which has led to something of a recovery. But I think the thing that you could really very tangibly see the difficulty of progressing to that A round in kind of that mid to late 2022 period.
Yeah, it's encouraging to see that bouncing back, though. You mentioned earlier Jared Isaacman and other figures like Elon Musk, obviously taking on prominent roles in the US government. What impact do you see in this tech-heavy administration having on the private sector?
Yeah. So people have asked, or raised concerns, I think to Jeff Bezos in an interview about Musk's any influence or bias that could be introduced in US government purchasing decisions. But hopefully that won't be the case. And I think Jeff Bezos has Elon has said, and who knows? But that we shouldn't allow that to interfere into the decisions. Jared Isaacman, obviously very familiar with the private space industry through SpaceX firsthand, having completed his own spacewalk. Seems very passionate about exploration and has spoken very positively about progress for humanity to the moon and Mars. So I would imagine that he's spoken about the importance and the role that the private sector plays in maintaining tech superiority in a global space capability race. So I think we could only see probably increased funding directed toward private space companies under a Jared Isaacman NASA role, given his relations and experience there, and also some pretty meaningful cost overruns at NASA with some key programs as well.
Yeah, I think with Musk and Isaacman in such prominent roles, it seems like we're on the cusp of a major shift towards commercialization, and which could really benefit. That we hope we'll see benefit from the sector overall. Something really exciting that you reported. Apple's significant investment into Globalstar with their plans to expand satellite services for iPhone was a huge development. How do you think this partnership will shape the future of SATCOMs and the role of private companies in space infrastructure?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty loud statement from Apple that intention to invest $1 billion into the company to help them expand their network so that they can provide Apple customers with iPhone satellite services. The partnership, so it started in 2022 when Apple rolled out that SOS feature. Globalstar currently operates about 31 satellites, and they're planning another 28 to help support all the additional capacity that it looks like will be almost entirely dedicated to Apple. So yeah, very clear signal there that direct satellite connectivity is very high importance to Apple, and I think we're going to see as a result of that, Android and others, kind of responding kind. I think it's kind of a boost. Well, and we've seen it at least in the share price of businesses like AST. I think other IoT constellations probably take this as quite a positive signal. But it all kind of points towards this convergence of terrestrial and space networks for really, truly globally seamless connectivity. Interesting statistic that I hadn't realized until looking into it a little bit more, but 90% of the world's surface isn't covered by terrestrial connectivity. Of course, a lot of that is oceans. But if you can bridge that gap with increasingly competitively priced satellite connectivity, then you're reaching a point where it doesn't matter where you are in the world, or the ocean, or the skies. You can stay connected at a reasonable price. So yeah, very very exciting. I think that's one of the really massive markets that the space will play an increasingly important role in.
Definitely an absolute game changer, no question there. Does anyone have any questions for Lucas on any of the topics discussed? If not, if you can't think of anything now, you can always post it in the chat, and he'll be happy to go back and answer offline.
For the record, the company is True Anomaly. I had to just do a quick Google search, but yeah, they raised like 100 million. True Anomaly in the US. Albeit, someone commented Anduril. Interesting that Anduril has been actually making quite a lot of expansions into space as well, both into space situational awareness, planning to build their own buses. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Well, we've got one actually come in here for you, Lucas. Looking ahead to 2025, what key developments do you think could accelerate in the beyond Earth subsector, for example, in space services?
That's an interesting one. So we're obviously invested in Voyager for in space services. So the thing So thinking more about the space infrastructure like Voyager and Axiom. So we're invested in Voyager. We plan to put up the next gen space station in the next few years. Axiom, as I've heard, is in a little bit of a difficult situation. So in terms of their finances, and they've been given priority over one of the basically to build their station off one of the airlocks on the ISS. So exactly what's going to happen with that, whether NASA or the government steps in to help bridge the financing, or if investors come in to raise a bunch more money and keep the business afloat. I'm not exactly sure how that will play out, but I think there is going to have to be some serious thought about the capital provided to Axiom, because it's one of the, I guess, two leading players to put up a next generation space station, and one is absolutely needed. I mean, I don't think US will be caught without having a presence in LEO while China does. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but it'll certainly be interesting to watch.
Any other areas you see as critical?
No, I'm just rereading the question. I mean, it's hard to predict exactly what kind of structures people will consider. Oh, actually, I think what Voyager is actively doing with Starlab is pretty interesting, and it is kind of this. It's a different financing solution to just pure venture capital. They've been executing on this kind of joint venture strategy, bringing in lots of different big corporate partners across multiple different geographies to help offset the costs of launching their space station. So I think that's actually a very clever way of spreading risk and raising capital and getting a lot of buy-in from lots of different geographies. So I think we actually are exactly seeing that kind of thing in the case of Voyager's Starlab joint venture.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for your insights today. It's been a pleasure discussing your findings. We'll be looking forward to continue this conversation in the chat, and if anyone has any further questions, we can always take them offline, as I said. But that's all we have time for today. But thank you, Lucas, for joining me.
Sounds good. Cheers.